What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another episode of Sports and Spiritual Things. I'm Dr. Andrew Patton. Look, tonight, wherever you catching, if it's day, early morning, I don't know where you at. Look, I'm almost tickled pink right now because this interview that I have coming up is not only nostalgic, but it's one of those things to whereas as somewhat I see myself as our big brother. She don't know that, but I'm so proud to have our guest coming on that I'm about to bring up. I'm telling you, she is a journalist par excellent. She covers WNBA and all different types of ESPN sports, and she's more than that. In fact, she describes herself as self-driven, self-motivated. She's a selfless person that I do know personally. She covers the WNBA and NCAA basketball. Those are her passions. She's covered the NBA, the NFL, the MLB, so she's more than a women's sports commentator. A lot of her work has also appeared in the New York Times, W Slam, and she is highly sought after. She's been on the 3-on-3 podcast, the BBTN Live. I mean, just look, countdown the game day. This sister is everywhere. And so without further ado, can I welcome my sister, Terrika Brasby Foster? At least make that Terrika Foster Brasby. Let me not mix that up. I don't want Greg looking for me. Hey, sis, what's up? And representing the Poodles in the building.
You already know how I do. Hey, it's been a long time coming.
Yes. And when I started this podcast, I knew I wanted some estrogen on this show because there's so many men that I could pull on. But I wanted somebody like you that has such a great story and background, in particular with what we do, because we merge the sacred with the secular, the spiritual with the sports, because they all go hand in hand. And for those that think that's sacrilege, read your Bible, because Paul, a lot of the times, would pull in certain sports references to help us to understand what our walk with God was like. And I don't think that you're any exception, because with your journey starting out in digital media independently and then making it all the way to ESPN. Let's talk through that for a second, and then we're going to dive into some stuff that I know you like, and I want the public to know how bad you are, and I do mean good when I say that, because this sister knows her sports. Even your website, I forgot to shout that out. She knows sports. Go check that out. She's got some great articles and content there. So she just ain't a pretty face. This lady knows her sports. So let's walk through that journey, kind of talk about the digital media days, those humble beginnings, and how you got to ESPN.
Yeah, well, first off, thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate being here. I'm glad that we could get back together, because when we talk about humble beginnings, you were part of my humble beginnings. We were together on the Sports Fan Radio Network, right? And so when I first got into this business and really started to take it serious, I was blogging with my homegirl Kenza. She had a blog, La Dolce La Cora, and she was like, "Hey, I just need somebody to be my sports writer. I just need somebody to like handle my sports section." And I was like, "I can't do that. Like, I'm not a journalist for real. Like, I can't do that." And she's like, "Nah, Terrika, you can do it." And so I did. I started just kind of doing more opinionated stuff, more columnist type stuff. And somebody by the name of Will Johnson read a couple of my articles. And he reached out to me and said, "Hey, I really want you to meet my guy, Jers. I think you guys will be great together. We have a radio network. It's called the Sports Fam. We've got Andrew Patton. We've got Dash." And I was like, "Okay, this sounds amazing. Sign me up. Even though I have no earthly idea what I'm doing, sign me up for it." But what it ended up doing was really putting me on the path to get to where I am now. That experience taught me, one, how to, understand the producer side. It taught me how to understand the power of media. It taught me how to network, honestly. Like, it taught me how to put yourself out there. And it gave me an opportunity to really show that sports is not gender specific. Like, it is an area, an arena that has love for everybody if you have love for it. And there were so many people who, in the beginning were like, "Yo, I never really heard a girl talk about football like that." And I said, "Well, maybe you need to be around more women, because we're out here." Right. So that's kind of where it started for me, was with the Sports Fam, hosting the shows on Tuesday, and then moving from Wednesday with Jers to Fridays, and then holding down Fridays. So from there, I saw that ESPN was hiring. I in that I thought that, you know, maybe this might be a bit ambitious for me to try to apply for a job at ESPN. But I said I was going to try it anyway. And so I did. I applied for a position as an audio editor. And while I was doing that, I decided if I was going to take it serious, that I really needed to take this profession serious. So I started freelancing with Yahoo. I decided to go back to school to get my master's degree in new media journalism. So that I could really understand the craft, understand everything that goes into being a journalist, understand what it means to really captivate an audience by telling a story in this digital age. And lo and behold, one December day, I started my first day at ESPN, and it's kind of been history ever since.
You know, and the thing about it, Terrika, is that when we started with the whole digital media thing back in, I think I started the Sports Credit back in 2010. That was before podcasting was hot. You know, the blogosphere was still hot, and a lot of traditional journalists, which we could kind of pivot into, because I want to hear your take about this. A lot of traditional journalists didn't like it. I remember there was a big symposium that HBO did, and you had all these old school columnists from Detroit, you know, Mitch Albom and Terrence Moore in Atlanta, and all these different people, you know, that was really upset that the blogosphere was really kind of shaking the stratosphere of sports, so to speak, the foundation. And many people's attention began to turn to digital media. So we cut our teeth that way. And of course, when I became a pastor, the passion for sports was still there, but there was a higher call. Yeah. And as I began to focus on that, got married, had babies, started a ministry, those kind of things, then God began to speak to me. And now I'm at a space where it's like, man, well, God, you spoke at the wrong time, because everybody's doing this now. but with that being said, though, I want to ask you this. I mean, now we talked about a pre-show a little bit, because Howard Cosell, who really was one of the forerunners to what we see right now, really being opinionated and having the journalistic chops to really keep you entertained. What do you think about social media? What do you think about athletes? And what do you think about just kind of the wild, wild west of sports journalism and just journalism, period, where you got a lot of ways you can get your news, whether it's fake or if it's reality? What say you?
That is a very good point. You know, I feel like it would be a bit hypocritical for me in a way to downplay. And I say this all the time. I can't really downplay social media, because a lot of the reason that I am where I am is because of the support that I got based on social media. I mean, even in the Sports Fam, we started kicking it, I want to say 2013 is when I came along, and I didn't meet my Sports Fam counterparts in real life until like 2017. I think that was the first time I met Jers for the first time in 2017. He was already my brother by that point. Like by that point, we were already family. So I think that it's all about how you use social media and how you use the digital networks to your advantage. I love the way that we do things now for example, gives athletes an opportunity to express themselves. I love that it gives people an opportunity to express themselves, but there is a fine line between having a platform to express myself or having a platform where I can have conversations as nuanced as they may or may not be with my peers, then calling yourself a journalist. And it's one thing that I know Stephen A. Smith says a lot. It's one thing that I absolutely agree with, is that when we have athletes and these people who have these kind of podcasts or have these platforms, these digital shows, there is a difference in having a digital show and being a journalist. My job as a journalist is to report the facts, accurately, and to be as truthful as possible and to find the truth in whatever it is that I'm reporting, not something that I may like or not like or care for or not care for. There have been plenty of times where I have started a story in my mind that it's going to go this way. And the more I report, the more I research, the more I learn, my whole perspective has to shift, because what I thought was the truth was not the truth. And that's just the bottom line. When it comes to certain people with certain voices, it's not that they don't, stick to what is true, but it is more so what is true and comfortable for them. And that's what I find with a lot of athletes. I find with a lot of athletes, when they have their shows, they want to talk about what their truth is. And that's fine. You have your platform to do it. But my job isn't to talk about what my truth is. My job is to find out what the truth is, regardless of what side of the line that falls on. And I think that's the biggest difference in where we are versus where people like Howard Cosell and Mitch Albom and the Rob Parkers of the world, they were writers. They were on the ground, boots on the ground, looking for those things that made whatever it was true, whatever facts were facts, finding the bigger story and bigger picture with people. But now, because everybody can pull up a mic and everybody can pull up, a webcam or whatever and have a YouTube channel, at this point, everyone gets to share what their version of the truth is. And there isn't always room for objectivity in that. And that really makes it scary when you're trying to decipher what's real and what's not.
And, I love how you put that, because a lot of the times the problem is for those of us like yourself, you got a master's. I have an undergrad degree in communications, but that was almost 30 years ago. There's a difference in how the news is reported. There are still certain aspects of, the basics and the fundamentals. But to the athlete, I think there is a bit of freedom there, because for so many years in sports reporting, there's been certain narratives that's been spun. So seeing all the smoke and seeing Draymond Green and seeing so many other guys really spin their own narrative, tell the stories behind the scenes that reporters would never get to actually hear or understand. One, because when you get in an argument with former athletes, and I'm sure you've had those same discussions the way I have with some of those guys behind the scene, is that when you're beating them at you're beating them at their own game, and then the only big joke they got is I played and you didn't. And sometimes that works, and sometimes it does not. So the same thing that you said, being a journalist versus just being able to create content, they're not remotely the same.
But they're both necessary.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
I think that's a good part that we have to say in 2024, content creators are necessary. Like, they have a way of reaching an audience that some of us don't reach. I think I told the line a little bit of being a journalist and a content creator, because I understand the social media realm and how it evolves. But there are some people who are like, listen, I can't report the way you can, but if you give me the story and tell me to get it in front of this audience, I can do that. So they're both needed and both necessary, but it grinds my gears when I hear somebody say, can I give you a great example?
Absolutely.
Shannon Sharpe and Cat Williams.
Oh my gosh. You went there. Go ahead.
Cat, don't come up here upset and angry that Shannon didn't follow up and ask the right questions. That man is not a journalist. Yeah. That man is a former athlete, one of the best tight ends to play the game, who has a show. And he invites people to come on his show and speak their truth and on his platform. If you want to find the truth in a story, then you need to go on a show with Diane Sawyer or Oprah or Gayle King and get to a journalist. But it was like, how you mad at him? Like, why you mad at him, Cat? That's not his thing. That's not what he do. He's someone with a platform. He allowed you to speak your truth. And if somebody comes after him and says, hey, I got some things to say about what Cat said because I ain't like it, he gonna give them a chance to speak their truth too. That man ain't a journalist. He ain't got no follow-up questions.
Well, but here's the other part that I found that was unfair about that, T, was just the fact that, look, Cat Williams came in hot, right? So if you've ever interviewed anybody, Cat Williams is kind of like I'm searching for the analogy correctly, the Lawrence Taylor of an interviewee, right? You just put him out there and go. He can stay out all night and party and do all the coke in the world. I know this is a spiritual show, but that's the story of who Lawrence was. He'd tell you himself. But I mean, on Sunday, the guy's ready. Now, for every Lawrence Taylor, there are 75 other guys that couldn't do that. Yep. But that's what Cat was. And all Shannon had to do was sit back and just let Cat be him. And it broke the internet. Now, with your trained journalistic ear and eye, you know, you can interview somebody and get 50,000 views. That guy's still getting views, right? So, and here's a theological analysis or analogy, because in our world as preachers and pastors, you know, we always argue, is seminary better than some country backwoods preacher that gets up and speaks from his heart and people understand? And sometimes both, as you said, both methods can work. Mm-hmm. It's just the preference of the listener. So we've talked about that space for a second. I want to dive into your sports brain, because
come on,
what people don't know, come on, Cletus. What people don't know is how brilliant you are. And not only just as a person, but even as if we just had to go here, as a female that's really towing the line and breaking through as an African-American female as such as that. That's not an easy thing. That's why your story is so remarkable. I just got to hear this from you, because I know you're not a Detroit Lions fan, but I know you represent the D. That's where you're from. But help me to understand, Dan Campbell. I'm really trying to get this, because he messed my pick up. I just thought they had all the pieces. I said, man, Green Bay the week before dropped 2 interceptions. I just know that this defense, they're not great, but they're good enough to make those plays. Yeah. And lo and behold, it was the coach, I think, that really cost the Lions their first ever trip to the Super Bowl. Am I wrong? Is the sports pastor off? Am I off? Do you need to pray for me to get this out of my spirit? Because I'm really disappointed in Dan Campbell.
Your spirit ain't led you wrong yet. And it's not leading you wrong right now. Because I sat here watching this thinking to myself, I understand, like, sometimes there are moments where you want to be aggressive. And I understand that there are moments where you want to stick to your guns and say, this is who I am. This is what we're going to be. But sometimes, every once in a while, you got to think about things and really reevaluate things and say to yourself, you know what? If I step outside the box this one time, it just might be beneficial for me. And I think that's what Dan Campbell didn't do. He just continued to say, I'm going to play aggressive. I'm going to be aggressive. I'm going to go for it. And I think what he missed is that part of being aggressive and part of being a dominating player, a dominating coach, a dominating team is knowing when to pull back, when to be conservative, when to sometimes, you know, take a step back and reevaluate my approach. And I think that's what cost them. There were moments where I felt that he should have been more aggressive, i.e., right before the end of the first half, when it was 20 seconds left on the clock, they were 4th and 2, and he went for the extra point. I mean, he went for the field goal versus going for the 4th down. Like, that's a moment where you can say, let me think about this here. My team is up right now, 21-7. They have been completely deflated. There is no confidence in this team. They have not been able to stop the run the entire half. I'm not going to give these men an opportunity to regroup. I'm going to go ahead and keep my foot on the gas, and I'm going to go ahead and go for 2. I'm going to go for the 4th down and just see if I can run this thing out, because they haven't been able to stop any of this 3-headed monster in my backfield the entire day. I think that was a moment that he played the conservative part, and he didn't need to. I look forward in the third quarter, even with all of the mishaps, right? Because let's be honest, those things don't happen in a regular game. A guy is not going to catch a ball off your helmet in a regular, like, that's not happening every Sunday. You know what I mean? You're not going to fumble the ball as in that fashion every Sunday. The Lions had done a pretty good job of taking care of the football majority of the season, right? So even if all of those, it still goes back to coaching. Here it is. You look at the score. You think about where your position is on the field, and you say to yourself, let me go ahead and take the points and give my guys an opportunity to fight for it in the end. And instead, you want to be aggressive. You want to stick to your guns, knowing San Fran has the momentum, and you see what happens. So I say all of that to say, I think Dan Campbell just pretty much did not understand his approach was not the approach in that moment, especially with that on the line. That can work in week 16. It can work in week 17. It can work in week 3. You don't take that approach in the NFC Championship. You got to play smart. You have to coach smart. Your guys depend on you. And I think you let them down with your approach in that moment.
We speaking to Terrika Foster Brasby of ESPN, and I'm telling you, boy, this is my sister, because you're one of the few national journalists that I've heard say that from their perspective, because I saw a lot of what the young kids call cap in the sports world from a journalist and analyst standpoint, where I saw a lot of defense of, well, you got to be who you are the entire time. You know, that's what you used. And I never understood that part. That really floored me. And this is my follow-up question to that. It seems as though when it comes to now, we're more opinionated than basically reporting the facts, so to speak. And I know the entertainment value moves the needle because, hey, who are we kidding here, right? There is an element of profitability when it comes to television and multimedia, from the digital space even down to the traditional space. But what say you about the mixed bag of some of your sports peers that seemingly cannot say what you just said? How are narratives in that world? Because most times guys like us, we don't get to peek behind the scenes. Kind of help my audience and help us to understand, help the sports pastor in my congregation understand, how are these narratives spun from a space of not just from facts, but these crazy opinions that seem to hype up one person but destroy another. Help us to understand that.
You know, I don't even know if I truly understand it myself. What I will say is, if I can do the sandwich method, right, where, you know, for those who might not know about the cookie method, Oreo cookie method, you have something good, something not so good, but then you end with something else good, right? So one thing I love is that there was a time where, as a journalist or reporter or just a media professional, you couldn't have a favorite, right? You couldn't dare go. I couldn't dare go on television and say I'm a Colts fan. They would be like, "What? What do you mean? You can't be a fan of a team. You cover it, like, you know what I mean? I am the Connecticut Sun sideline reporter, but it's not a secret that I love the Connecticut Sun. Like, that is, since the Detroit Shock had become a defunct organization, the Sun have been my team. I live in Connecticut. It makes sense. So there was a time that we could not be fans and professionals. And I love the fact that we have the ability to do that now, and it's not taboo. The problem is sometimes fandom and relationships, they cross lines. As journalists and reporters, we have to build relationships with players, with coaches, with front offices, with agents. You have to. You don't want to be the person that goes out there and says, I think this person is trash and they can't block to save their life. And then you got to the next week show up in their locker room and ask them questions in the press conference. Like, that's a very awkward situation. And you're probably not going to get very far doing that. So you do have to be careful and be mindful with how you word things. But I think that when you exercise a level of professionalism where people know, and I'm going to go and quote Denzel Washington from Remember the Titans, where he says, I might be a mean cuss, but I'm the mean cuss with every player out there on that field. That is the kind of journalist I would like to be, where people may say, hey, Terrika, you might have talked junk about this team, but you talked the same junk about that team and that team and that team when they were all in the same situation, including your own. And I think that is where we have sometimes lost. There are some analysts, and I know you know what I'm talking about. There are some analysts where you don't have to know who or what they chose on the screen, because as soon as you hear them open their mouth, or as soon as you hear their name, you know exactly what team they're gonna pick. You know exactly what and there are just some that are like that, where you're just like, I know he's gonna root for the Cowboys because this is what he's gonna find a way to make sure that the Cowboys look good, sound good, come up with an excuse for them. There are other analysts in other sports the same way, where you might say, oh, I know he picked the Celtics. That man always he never never find anything wrong with the Celtics. It's blah, 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 blah. That is where we have to, it's us. Because it's not the system. It's not somebody forcing you or making you do these things. You have to figure out, where can that line stop? And that's something I don't think people have always done a great job of. They blur the line of fan and professional. And a lot of people rely on us to be more professional than fan in certain moments, whether that's people who are into sports betting. If you're into sports betting and that's your thing, you don't want to hear somebody on television being a fan. You want them to give you the most objective outlook that they can, because you're going to make a decision based on what it is that they say. If you are in that press conference room, you don't need to be in there as a fan, because if I got to ask you the tough question, I need to ask you the tough questions. And that's just the bottom line of it, right? So it's just it's a personal thing with everybody. And so I don't know how you fix that or how you change that. But I think the more people recognize it and the more people talk about it, it forces analysts to have a little bit more self-awareness to say, maybe I do let my fandom come out a little bit too much for this player or this team or this whatever. But I just don't know how. I just don't know how you create the shift. But I'm glad that you're noticing, because a lot of us notice.
Well, because I've been such a part of the industry, off and on, and having studied it and being raised in the industry from a space from afar. The days of the humble beginnings of ESPN, when in the early 90s, a lot of the catchphrases from the traditional media didn't like it. They didn't like Stuart Scott with Booyah and all the things that he did, while Craig Kilborn and the other guys did the same thing. And Stuart Scott had and God rest his soul and blessings to his family, had the courage to still be who he was. And then he became a cultural icon. So you got that portion, right?
You're talking about authenticity, honey.
Yes. I read his autobiography shortly after he passed away, and he talked about his journey, and it really touched my heart, just from a space of saying, here's a guy that's only 10 years older than me, but really blazed a trail for not only Black journalists, if we just want to say that and we have to tell the truth, but really opened the doors to accept different types of personalities. And even now, I think all the athletes that are able to really have their own voice be disseminated into these digital media streets. They owe a solid to guys like that, Cosell and others that was not afraid. Even Rich Eisen and Dan Patrick kind of pulling away from ESPN and creating that lane before this. So there's a lot of different ways you can look at this. But I want to ask this, because again, I want to pick that sports brain of yours, because there's such a vast knowledge there. The whole thing with the players in the NBA. I want to get some of your take on that, and we can talk some WNBA too, because I want to kind of mix that in too as well, because I want to really be fair to the knowledge that you have. But starting with the NBA, we see that there is this kind of tug of war in the Players Association now with how you get awards. How many games you play to get the MVP, and I watched some commentary, and I thought it was interesting because. And I could agree with the space of saying, well, the reason why these caps are there is because we had players abuse certain aspects of what they call load management. You see this stuff up close and personal in between with the WNBA, and then even having some ears to the ground with the NBA. How much of this is the players' fault versus just the NBA cracking down? Kind of give us a high-level view of what that truly looks like.
I think it's a little bit of both, and I'll tell you why. I love it, to be honest. I love it. 65 games, you get paid millions of dollars to play a kid's game, to be honest. You get paid millions of dollars, and there are people, friends, those who don't have the means or the resources nearly as much as some others do, and they might spend their last $50 to get a ticket to go see you play, but you're not playing because you're tired. Really? Really? I wasn't here for it. So I absolutely love this minimum of you want to qualify for awards. You want to qualify for these accolades. We need to see you play. Now, however you work that out with your team, that's with you and your team. If your team works out a schedule where you miss these many days or you take these many days for rest, perfectly fine. But this is the minimum. I also think it makes players or forces players to really evaluate their health concerns. And that leads me to the conversation that I had recently about Joel Embiid. I thought at the beginning of the season, and I still say it. I said I think he's going to be MVP. I think he's back-to-back MVP. I said that back in September before the season. Back-to-back MVP. That man is hurt. Period. Right? I think the news just came out that he's got like a meniscus injury or something in his knee. So we know that he's legitimately hurt. But I think that for him, and I'm just using him as an example, it's not about personal accolades. It's about, I've gotten the personal accolades. I've gotten the MVPs. I've gotten these other awards. What I need is the championship. So if that means I got to miss these 15, 16 games, or I go above whatever the maximum is, but that allows me to get my body right, to get my knees right, to get myself together so that we can win a championship at the end of the season, I'm willing to risk that. And so what I love most about this right now is I think it's going to weed out those who are really about team and those who are really about self. If you are about team, you will be willing to say, you know what, I'm probably going to miss a few games, but I need to get my body right because I think we're good enough to go the distance at the end, and I need to be around for that. Some that are about self are going to say, well, maybe I can risk this knee. Maybe I can risk this elbow. Maybe I can risk this thumb because I need to make sure I have enough games so that people can see me shine. Well, they going to see you shine, but y'all going to be out in the first round and you ain't going to have a thumb. So make it make sense. So I think that's where we are now. Obviously, the NBA, PA are going to fight for the players, right, wrong, or indifferent. That's their job. And so if the players have an issue with that, they are obviously going to be the ones to step up to support them. But overall, I think this was a smart move for the NBA to put a cap limit on it. And now we're going to really see who's about team, who's about self.
You know, I love that because a lot of the times there's always been a slippery slope between guys that are really hurt and then those that are kind of cheating the system. You know, a Ben Simmons, a James Harden at times. You see these kind of things, and you're right. People pay their hard-earned money, even those that are sitting in the nosebleeds. You know, parents that work 2 and 3 jobs, and they figure out a way to get their son to the game. You know, and you're not playing, or that star player is not playing. So it means a lot. And look, I've always been the guy that have tried to toe the line on both sides, but on this one, it's really hard not to see, because I'm anti, Big Brother really kind of toiling their will and their advantage over those that are, I guess, stakeholders as it relates to being on the court or being in the field of battle to allow owners and these leagues to make the money that they make. Because if you're paying a guy $200 million, then how much are you really making? Right? I get it. Right. When I read $40 Million Slaves by Bill Rhodes, it changed my thinking, because when you understand the business of the professional sports, all 4 major sports, it really makes you look at it differently. But this issue, this is where the players kind of really, I think, ceded some of their control to really be able to fight for the right things for when you are hurt, or when the next CBA comes around. Well, hey, if you ain't playing all the games, then when you sit out, maybe you don't get paid, or you only get a fraction of your salary. I mean, you're opening up those types of discussions if you're the NBA Players Association. So I want to ask this, because I saw another interesting thing, and I won't keep you very much longer. I know you got so many other things to do. You rocking with the little people today, so I definitely appreciate you. But this is the part of I think, your expertise that I think that you would understand and help us paint the picture, because I grew up, but because when the WNBA started in the late 90s, I had just got out of college, and I fell in love with the Houston Comets. Now, I hope my wife ain't watching this, but she probably will watch it at some point in time. Now, I have to admit, I had the biggest crush on Cheryl Swoops when she was I did. Yeah, at Texas Tech. I did. When she played there, I remember she was back in 93. She led an improbable run. And, you had to have a crush on the girl. And, back then, nobody was really talking about women's basketball like that. Even in the 80s, I used to watch the Tennessee Vols because the teams were always good. And they had ladies like Deidre Charles. And I was like, man, that's a cute name. She cute, And then you watch the game, right? So that's kind of what that was my introduction to women's basketball. But she said something recently in her interview, and she was asked her opinion about Caitlin Clark, who was the dynamo of college basketball. I believe she's at University of Iowa, if I'm remembering correctly. And then, of course, Angel Reese, the Barbie doll, she's called at LSU. And she was asked who would possibly have the better WNBA career. And she said that she thought that Caitlin Clark's skill set may not translate. I want to hear your thoughts on that, because I think a lot of people took it a certain way. Now, I'll tell you this before you answer that question. I think that if Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese can get to the WNBA, they could be the WNBA's Bird and Magic, from a space of really opening up more eyes and attention, kind of back to what the WNBA was in the late 90s, when those great Houston Comets teams were great with Cheryl and Tina and all those ladies. That was, man, they was fun to watch, and they was the first women's basketball dynasty. So with her credibility, she gets to say whatever she wants. That's a lady that you listen to, and not just because I had a crush on her, but she has the accolades, she has the resume to say some things. So what do you think about that before I give my opinion of the two things as it relates to Cheryl's comment about Caitlin?
Sure. So I want to make sure that I quote her fairly, because she definitely said that she thought that both Caitlin and Angel would be great pros. But what she said was, are they going to come into the WNBA immediately and do what they're doing now? Absolutely not. And she's 100% correct. She's 100% correct. And the crazy thing is that this actually happens, in my opinion, on all levels in all sports. But it's more prevalent in the WNBA because the roster spots are limited. So there is no guarantee that you being a first round pick or a second round pick guarantees you a spot on a roster. You got to earn your spot on a roster, versus in the NBA and the NFL. Not so much MLB. It just kind of depends. But NFL and NBA for sure. If you in the first round, you're a lottery pick, you on the roster. You own the squad. You're going to get your rookie contract. You're going to get rookie minimum. You're just there. But I want you to think about how many times we have seen players just play phenomenally at the collegiate level. And then when they get to the professional level, either they don't translate in their positions. So how many times have we seen college players have to switch positions from, DB to LB, from, corner to safety, for whatever, because their skill set that they had in college didn't quite necessarily translate over when they got into the league, where the men are bigger, faster, stronger. That exact same thing happens in the WNBA, but with less spots. And so I think last year you got a great opportunity to see there were some phenomenal players from the college level where you were the top of your game collegiately. But then you get in this building with these women where there are only 3 spots on the squad. There's 3 spots on the squad. And of these 12 teams, because there's only 12 and there's only 12 spots, and not every team carries 12 players. Some teams only carry 11. So you really don't even have 12 spots on every team. But you think I'm going to let this rookie come in here and tell me or take my spot? No, I'm going to outplay her. I'm going to outshine her. I'm bigger than her. Great. A perfect example of that is Chelsea Gray. Chelsea Gray, she plays for the Las Vegas Aces. We call her the point guard because what she does with a basketball is amazing. That woman been playing basketball, was a standout at Duke University. There is not a rookie in the college game right now that's going to walk into Las Vegas and take Chelsea's spot. Yeah, I said it. I don't care how good you are. You're not taking her spot. Like, that's the mentality that these women have. So when Cheryl said that, she wasn't saying these women won't be good. She's not saying these women won't be phenomenal pros, but she's saying, you see Caitlin launching this from the logo, she's probably not doing that in the WNBA. You see the way Angel battles down low to get rebounds because she leads the team in rebounds. She's probably not doing that in the WNBA when you got 6'7" Jonquel Jones down here. She's not doing that. So that's what Cheryl was saying. And I just don't think that Cheryl's wrong. I just don't think that she's wrong in that assessment. It is a transition to go from the college to the pro level.
And I didn't think that she was wrong either. I just thought that the chatter from a lot of different people, because I think there was a little bit of a racial element that kind of creeped into there.
Oh, yeah.
Because Caitlin is such an exciting player. And even when the taunting went back and forth in the championship game last year, and Angel did this with the ring, and Caitlin, they were trying to make Caitlin, again, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier.
Well, you knew I got through in there, right?
Yeah. That's what I'm bringing it up.
Did you know they threw me in there? They threw my video in the chatter. Come on, oh, yeah. I was so upset because it was taken so out of context. I was so upset. I was so upset that they took the video so out of context. So if you have a second, if I can tell you the story.
Yes, please do. Please tell. This is all about you, T. You tell the story.
Okay, please. So
this is testimony service. Come on,
testify. This is what happened. I could not believe this. So this is what happened. We were doing a quick social media video on all 4 teams who were in the Final Four. We had already done something with South Carolina. We had already done something with LSU. So when it came time to do something for Iowa, we said, oh, well, you know what? People have started to call Caitlin Clark like a little sassy, like that she is like clapping back on the court when she says stuff. So we asked all of her teammates, like, what are the things that Caitlin says, like when she's clapping back? And so her teammate says, all of them were like, no, Caitlin actually she's not even the one who really like be clapping back. Most of the time when she's talking to the bench. So when Caitlin was doing this thing, she wasn't actually doing it to the player on the other side at all. She was doing it to the coach that was on the bench. But the way that the camera angled it was like she was doing it to a player. So when Angel Reese then in turn started doing this to her after she lost or after she was losing, it was kind of like, we weren't doing that to a player. And so I was of the mindset that, listen, this is sports. People talk junk in sports. If you dish it, you got to be able to take it. Not the biggest of deals. But because there were so many people who were trying to say that Angel Reese was classless and doing this was doing too much, they took my video of me talking about Caitlin from like 2 days prior and started circulating, oh, but here they are using this Black girl to support Caitlin being sassy and support Caitlin being rude to people. And I was mind blown.
Well, soundbite journalism is always dangerous. And in particular when it's 2 days. But you were being fair even before it happened because, and I didn't know that part of the story, but here is my take on it. I thought that Caitlin's poise after the game, and when she was asked, because again, this is where narratives get or spun or created, because even I mentioned Bird and Magic, even in those days, right? Both of those guys had great respect for each other, but they kind of understood what was on the line. They had to toe every which way, from the black-white scenario down to the fan base standpoint, who's better, who's good, who's going to win, what is history going to say, all those different types of things. But behind the scenes, Magic and Bird was like, they were tight, even before they ever played against each other in college. They had played on a junior Olympic team together. There's footage of them doing that and dominating together.
Yeah. Well, you know that exists in the W already between April Wilson and Breanna Stewart.
There
I think that's the equivalent. Yeah,
absolutely. So when you understand it from that perspective, how sometimes in media we can spin certain narratives because it we used to say in college when I was studying television, if it bleeds, it leads, right? So if it's got controversy, and Caitlin, to her credit, she said, "Look, I can handle the trash talk. Angel Reese is a great player. She could have taken that bait from a lot of people that wanted her to go down that path. And to her credit, she did not. And Angel followed suit. And now, to me, and maybe I'm the get off my lawn guy, but I would have liked to see both of them have a little less of that in their games, just so it's not confusing. But I'm here for it, right? I mean, I watched the Fab Five, for crying out loud, okay?
Yeah.
I mean, when I played pickup ball, even when I try to get out there at nearly 50, my mouth is doing this at 100 miles an hour. Look, it's a part of the game. And most people don't even know that Larry Bird was one of the greatest trash talkers. There's legendary stories and you wouldn't even know. I mean, and the media never covered it that way because their narrative was that here's a guy that only jumps yay high and he's doing it with his brain. And Bird never bought into it. Bird would get upset. I mean, it was known that, hey, he's like, why y'all putting the white dude on me? Why y'all disrespecting me? And then when they would, he'd torch him until they put somebody else over there that was black and then give him the same business anyway.
Give him the same business. Yeah.
That was Bird. That's who he was. So when you understand it from that perspective, I think that those things really boil my blood.
Yeah.
And
I know there too that it's a black woman and we are stereotyped to be angry. We're stereotyped to be aggressive and how we speak. And so if these were two white girls, probably would have been just that. I mean, we already have to deal with the narrative that women shouldn't trash talk because we're women and it's women's sports. And so how dare us be emotional creatures and have attitudes or passion. You know, it's passion when the guys do it, but we're emotional when women do it. But when you add the dynamic, which is a whole different conversation about it being a black woman that was doing this, now you're adding the additional, that's how black women are, you know how they are, you know how they react, how they talk, how they do. So it really became, it kind of has, and it still does feel in women's basketball. And I'm going to just say it because even now it feels like there's a racial divide that if you are cheering for LSU or if you're cheering for South Carolina, it's because you want the black girls to win. Forget the fact that they're really good teams. Forget the fact that they're really talented and they're well coached, but there's the black teams. And then if you like the Iowas of the world, or if you like the University of Connecticut's of the world, you are the white teams. And that's just how the more and more we get into the tournament, watch what I tell you, the more and more you'll start to see it will begin to feel like it's white versus black all over again.
And and it's funny because we're just in Black History Month, and it's interesting that you put it that way because the heartbreaking thing, and this is where my sports nerd and even the sports pastor is about to come out now, because this stuff goes all the way back to Jack Johnson and the Great White Hope stuff, right? We have always racialized sports, and then you picked it up with Joe Louis and Max Schmeling, and then when it wasn't another white heavyweight for some time, even Martin Lawrence in the 90s told a joke about America wanting a white heavyweight champion. He said it never would happen. Of course it did, because Tyson Fury and others, Jerry Cooney, those kind of guys became champions. But what's interesting is that when you see that history and that narrative, and even down to in basketball, Georgetown was Black America's team. We're trying to do that with Colorado. And they ain't busted a grape yet. And one of the things that really surprised me about your boy Stephen A. Smith is the fact that he rides Dak Prescott like a horse, but then Colorado has minimal improvement, and it's like, oh, it's great. Or he made a comment that was so crazy that he said that if Deion was coaching Florida State, that they would have made the playoff. I was like, that's blasphemous from a guy that great in sports journalism. And I love you, Stephen A. Smith. I do, but that was crazy to me. But anyway, I digress. The point I'm making is that it's unfortunate that Caitlin and Angel can't be who they are, and that we have this sickness in America that causes us to choose sides based on a lot of different narratives that have nothing to do with nothing. And it really reveals the heart of the individual. We see this in college sports, like when kids are getting recruited, if they don't choose your school, they N-words and B's and all kind of stuff. It's crazy when we understand this stuff, and it shows you how deep the rabbit hole this stuff goes down. And I know that you got to run. I don't want to keep you any longer than I need to, but I want to do this before we leave because, again, I mean, this is a show that really wants to merge the spiritual with sports. And I want to wish you all the best. And I want to thank you for taking your time, because you're very sought after. You're very busy. Every time I cut on ESPN and I catch your face, I'm pointing. I know her. Yeah, that's my girl. And then not only that, I think the first time, I can't remember what the young lady's name is. That was the first time. There's a young lady that's on First Take that she has this gold hair or something. She had a purple.
Martin.
Yes, I thought that was you. Y'all could be twins, literally.
I love Kimberly. She's such a nice woman.
I can tell.
It's the Brooklyn. She's such a nice woman. It's the Brooklyn in her.
but it's not even that. It's almost like when I see her, I'm like, my girl T can do that. Real talk, just from a standpoint, I thought, is that T? I had to do a double take because I think you guys could be cousins or sisters or something. May check that DNA, because I don't know if you know about my family side, but sometimes papas get around, uncles get around a little bit, sometimes that DNA gotta kind of come on through. No, we can be cousins.
23andMe. We need a 23andMe.
Yeah, absolutely. But I want to say a quick prayer for you to bless your career and speak life and destiny over you, because I really believe that your hard work and even the stuff that I think that when we talk about sports and we talk about spiritual things and you telling your testimony of how you got to where you are with the hard work. Yes, you started at a place that most people don't want to start, and then God leading you to just apply, not for on camera work, but just being an editor. And look at you now. And I think so many times in our lives, T, we missed the opportunity to just start somewhere, because everybody's not going to be on the camera. Everybody's not going to be a personality. And though you had the chops, you went just full saying, look, you know what? I'm going to get my foot in the door, get my degree, get myself in place, show what I can do. And when that opportunity opens up, you did it. You're an inspiration, not only to me and others that know you, and even those that will get to know you nationally. I believe that people are going to really know your story. You represent yourself very well. You represent your sorority and your family and your husband. Love to him. I hadn't met old Greg yet. I
wish he was here. He got work.
You know what? That's okay. I'm gonna meet him someday. But the thing that's cool about it though is that it takes a strong man to really be able to do that. And I've watched you guys together with your daughter and all that stuff, and just kind of the leap of faith to go to Connecticut, a cold place like Connecticut where they get snow. And look, I'm in the South. We get 2 inches of snow, everything slows down. Y'all still going to work, right? Yep. And blizzards and all that other stuff, and smiling on camera like, hey, they got to go home and brave the elements. But, it's just so inspiring to see you. And I just want to pray for you really quickly, if I may. Father, I bless you, and I thank you for our sister who came on our show to bless us. Our relationship goes back years and years and years. And God, she could have big timed us and said, look, I'm busy. I got bigger platforms. But she saw fit, God, to come on our show. And Lord, we just thank you for what you're about to do in her life, God, as you continue to open up even more doors for her talent and her gift to be seen. God, we thank you that her family is blessed, oh God. We thank you that she's a torchbearer and even a trailblazer, oh God, from a standpoint of not only as an African-American journalist, God, but as a female and even as a person of color that really understands so many different angles. God, I thank you that she has favor with her bosses, with producers, oh God, new shows, new opportunity, God. We speak those things into existence. We call those things that are not as though they were. So, Father, we give you praise, God. We give you glory. We give you honor for our sister, Terrika Foster Brasby, the next big thing in sports journalism. God, we give you praise, glory, and honor. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Yes.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on. And look, if you're watching this show, we just want to say this really quickly before you leave. Look, we have a lot of laughs. We say a lot of different things, but if you may be watching the show and you may not know who Jesus Christ is, and even if you do, and you walk the way you grew up in church, you see a lot of crazy fake stuff, and then a little peanut head guy like me comes on the air or comes on, and you kind of get this whole thing. You say, hey man, what is this whole thing about faith and sports, those kind of things? If you ever have any questions and you want to rock with us one-on-one, hit that like and share button, and our email is there. Reach out. We'd love to hear from you. And I'm just honored and thankful that we were able to take up just a little snippet of your time to give you some fun, to give you some advice. So if I can bless the show, God, thank you for the viewers. God, thank you for those that watch, God, even those that have issues and challenges, oh God. And this little time of fellowship and fun with a good friend, maybe, God, it was inspiring to hear a story, to hear a background, God. Those dreamers out there that have aspirations, not only in media, God, but all manners of things, God. Let them know that humble is the way, low is the way, God. Bless your people, oh God. Father, bring our country together. Bring our world together, oh Lord. I just preached Sunday about loving our neighbors, oh God. Let us not pass by each other when we see each other in trouble, God. Let our nation, let our world, let our networks, God, let our media community, oh God, trained journalists and untrained journalists, God, have a collision course of synergy of respect and honor for each other. God, we love you. We thank you. We give you praise, glory, and honor. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well, hey, this has been another episode of Sports and Spiritual Things. Like, follow, share. I'm looking forward to building even a more verbose and just, man, great big audience. A ubiquitous, that's a big word for big audience of people that not only love God, but love sports. May God bless you. May He keep you, is our prayer. Thanks to our sister Terrika Foster Brasby of ESPN for joining us. We'll see you real soon right here for another episode of Sports and Spiritual Things. God bless you. See you soon.